Seleng duta man sulang pastor sandario. Seleng lu gomra lo ase kotelia del bay do sire al tuta rubak al dios. Elngia gomra lo ase ula al sil se kada katmok tial el kampak tergid asel no mi tigai geri rabek al sil se la wonget. Tial timir gid el tiram let magalurior el matsmok raurior. Mang gua suada dimo highlight ra adal adal tial ruedra kampak lo mugedra al tutau. Of course seguida amda sa minister of finance gaya chief negotiator regid unora artial urior ngaria timingin ngar belau edri kamnaria timingin of island mang meba umu lo mugel ngar bitang ngar rubak ngar bitang ngar rubak ang klela Jeff Farrow sumu kadwa sen tokara ka kampak tengia la sel tiaru mengia koter kamangala arek siringi lo mugila tokara kampak sera ngoni nga sera time al staff for President Carter engia koter milsada tokara kampak alia President Carter late 70s emrogo en adar bela amal nom dali sera staff for Chairman Delugo era ukhatemela kampak. Of course enga dongali rubagal mukatatal el orior kabelment trablu amrigel idrengar olbi leselu kelbol president democrat ukmura White House ngora mgela President Clinton, right? And then of course Obama administration, not too much.
No, I declined that.
Oh, he declined. Oh, that time you were already private.
Yeah.
Yes. And then ang katamral ngal tanga tersel ngia to cloud ngi ngaramol me yeser uk mlangul swil mergi tersera uk 2009 I guess it would have been 2009 ngulura mgla president toribio ngara uk negotiation sel lomregal compact naria aklagado ngi segi the time magada sera dule aurora kada sengira ngaria timergi del sel magalora mgel ngaria wil cloud ngerti di sel lobang karuba kada kadilngi ngaria timelgin ngara Washington DC sel kombalil law firm Aiken Gump etrige of course ege law firm ra DC ngaria arbek pagengil adal ngari lorior el mostly al sumat adal lorior lo mgedat adra tamle adar seluk ege tablo blanc ngaria Republicans or Democrats. For example, ataram aselun go sergi del sel dora Washington e do dura congressmen mar senators ngel former chairman of foreign affairs a house white trigi del el ada dulu spare tirm tumo kaigal asimra mumno se tatal moladura other olbira bluram rigel especially senate ma house matira moladura president Biden el malasamal ersel mlegotron tidel wase Kotulu le tiada kada tagayani egirel mongot angel adal dulo angel mang katamral di mereka sulel sel ukka ya ngilung ngima tigel ko bangel ngara bluram rigel wal li selurio sa ya ukka kamek introduction gal el imora dilo bangel gal Lauren Henry gomesa conversation kala okora be sergal aldir giler dera blur belau ningam le loera housel were you here for what 4 years yeah 4 years ngilo abar mga bar der belau esera boda gotru obis engay amle first legal counsel yid mangulura la mga dele rura di dirigam noria urioling inura bluram rigel mga Chief Legal Counsel Seattle City Council. Lo yara la loro lo ngare ungel di tara dulungi tinga se oi maral mortial besel ngral di la kamo besa kamo magyos pero gal lo malmi tel ore da kampak. Mauleng malmal lo mangede en artial al silsile tira da ore lam dai se mertial men osorgi lo malmi tel ore tara yel gotro godal da le cloro al blada al bangari. You know, adregal lo mungkin adalah alsil sa ngania terun mga kalala adalo mga minister. Kung sa Lindsay Timarong, kung may adim dala Lindsay. Ngadri kalang karakwa mending kadamal mereka sulel ukle lemes serigid. Of course nga present ra PIDB direct chair a COFA Trust Fund. Kada mereka sulel part tial negotiating team rigid. Kami am daya director PGST. Ngamal to kaungel director PGST hindi direct ngam laro aurora compactra uktial negotiation o magela foreman administration o magel maral mem kataman mereka sulel. You know, one of the things that I was sharing with our leader Elia kasi sila temela present ng Amoral President. Mga compactor na 1994 nga chief negotiator Udoy amle atal sel compact transition committee. Udoy amle chair sel committee. Muklo tutela da tutira mikarela adal part traigal urion makmal menga sulela chief negotiator le inbor ba tokon mikarela. Le you know kama mong expire o kakala. Udok mo latar umrael. Di sel knowledge sel you know of course a president na kamuram lamrael adrong ulit. Hindi kita maram menga sulele minister sel na talo lukpil skit sel time. You know I think we gather قضوا all share om terabek ladel وقضا أيجلوك the silu bersay am lesa dulu kasih makrata ngal med improve relal ضرور تيال بس agreement or mang oh pwede ngal minister ang rabita mo kadul all besering ingamal ya karela mang mal oh kadamre ngasulel الديرال 2010 makamla involved ring so you know ayegedel cloud ng tira raigal kakarusel agreement bla involved ring help ring mo nesedel التماغي أورولو مجرا بلورا أمريكا قمرا لو أساس القتل لكلو تطلل سوادا المقتلين مرا بلورا أمريكا أورولو متنا أساس أجيرا لونغي أمريكا أجيرا لونغي ربيلاو ديغال سيول أكتيو مقبيتان قد قاين سيو قد تماغل العليم بارتنرز رجال أورولو أجيرا التابسولا أورولو ديغال سيول دي مسقامل لابو لسونغرين لقم مسوكمان musuya belur bela lo magas gida de kadolita metara kadolita sel girel blingelet ile gida ukngania do malum sa belur amrigel kada menenga sulit trial ngartiar el alsil e bai mestriate al ngartiang mongbosebil kamera dra media logera full details raiger rogul questioner kami algira la tial kampak teri akti mereka sudah ada belau para kaumral biskit memlesi ada order tial order ada kan mereka sudah ada olbil you know gimle betokol gibor olbil ase we need manil gut maklitiam etmal lemre ada tebda do ase tial team agirel fully funded agirel al hire ada si dulia order gut makli seguida habló lo con el ministerio así la como me tial expense me tial el ingreso al motabdi el gira la compact review el investment because ingira drama sing il vaise mangada kada merenga asulire you know ngara tokol dilia Mr. A special envoy unit really wase kadamal suada mesa ratification or olbira kalulaw. As we know in 2010 and dimlaga ratification or olbira kalulaw. Ara compact because hindi kal required. Hindi ngungil tokoy serli ilangungil siyasingin mo ablur amrigel wase oy kidra adar belaw a oldu bertial uldaso et magal tianga bladesang kadam lagut makli way kamil adar amrigel makamam magidire kal oy ngari. Ileng ngoti sel klisi ala del willeri magdamal hopefully egal information and the release really qotel sokal merenga sulera adara olbil el nosa era elira 11 o'clock kadamitra amayo ayi akmal mle nota idisira delegates el marset mle 15 el delegates Idim le ibu sa imol delegate terang along aleng mlaring ya al sungul mumlo of island. Ding mral le full house le toka karir. Tira kan mga sulila senator inapol tira senate ma senator whip sel mlarsay luk nasi lo kera igel leng kau tu tira la bon yang wil clothing tir ura bodo initial igal document ma eling miro sa babil mortir mo da ministry babil ngir edirigal kalau rasa melaria imora meeting tilo tira rumukul belar segidal 11 o'clock ra tu tau mumlo ya tiga melaria meeting tilo tira rumukul belar kiran sada tokora syugang mendim lakal si ilmei di sel kau tu tira la mungila clothing gidal adar belar rogui tial tial ramidiar elanga asel mutel meski mate almo como gera igel koma gai hofla minister mar adalang artial si ilsma rogui ano ise dia baik namun okay open aula le baik dengan discussion sila
Como Madam Commercial President 11:30, I know there were mentioned mlaringi ako ra summary regal ngartel agreement and the sabel just sorry to repeat again to highlight tamal sa mamal other than the MOU akimula kaping ya
como lang kapir MOU
yeah
okay
Thank you, Lei. I asked Minister Matul to back me up if there's anything he thinks needs to be explained in a different way, maybe in Palauan. Let me first start with the sequence of this process. As you know, the negotiations actually started 3 years ago under the previous administration. We took over from that point, and we felt that it was short of what Palau needed. So we positioned ourselves differently and said that this was unacceptable and we need to revisit this. At the same time, we built our advisory team and we started putting our information together, our request. After the U.S. selected their special presidential envoy, Mr. Ambassador Yun, to lead their team, we held our first meeting. It was a rocky start, but we were able to express our positions and see how far apart we were. Then we took it from there and started refining our package that we wanted to work on. It's important to note that there is a timing issue. For Palau especially, we are from the pandemic and the decline in tourism before the pandemic, we were in a place where we were starting to borrow money and at the same time use our whatever reserves we had built up since 2015. The U.S. recognized that that was a key issue for us, what Ambassador Yun calls short-term liquidity. We also are looking for our long-term prospects as a country to build and be more self-reliant and independent of these economic and climate change shocks. The U.S. recognized that, but in order for us to address the short-term liquidity, we decided that we would do an MOU that talks about what we had negotiated up to that point, which was the financial package. And the financial package focuses on the assistance that would help us get towards where we would like to be in 20 years. But one of the key features of what we did was to allow us to receive a financial package 1 year early. And that's why we signed the MOU. And the MOU was specifically for the purpose of allowing President Biden to submit numbers to Congress. So we are already in Congress with a budget amount to support our package. From there, we continue to work on specific language and other items like federal programs and services, both inside the negotiation and outside with the U.S. government and with the U.S. Congress. Since then, sometimes remotely, sometimes in person. And we were able to start working on the specific language that would be used to eventually draft a bill that will go to Congress. And once that is approved and signed by President Biden, the main part of the negotiation is done. We still have a bit more negotiating to do on specifics like certain federal programs and other things that we would like to see. But the main part of the compact, the financial package, economic assistance, has been negotiated. And I think in terms of comparison of where we were and where we are in a much better position now. So yesterday, as the President said, we briefed Congress on a little bit more detail of the agreement. And that agreement that we briefed on, the language was actually worked on until the night before. So things are happening very quickly, and there's a reason for that. But this is the document that we briefed the OAK on, and what I initialed with Ambassador Yoon at 4 p.m. yesterday, or a little after 4 p.m. The initialing was significant. We were able to do that symbolically in Palau, which is very significant. And the importance of initialing is that there are still some procedures to go through on the U.S. side before Ambassador Yoon can sign. Those are still pending. We expect that those approvals will be received by the time we go to Port Moresby in Papua New Guinea, and then we will be able to sign the document. So because this is still a work in progress, we are not releasing specific information like copies of the agreement at this time. It's not really done until we sign. The U.S. will be giving the agreement to their Congress after they turn it into legislation, and we will give the agreement on our side for OEK review and endorsement. So that is the process. Shown in the agreement totals up to almost 900 million over the course of 20 years. Now, this is significant because it's about 3 times as much as what we received in 2010 and more than twice what we started with when this administration took office. But there are a lot of benefits that are happening outside of the negotiations, and we are not counting those efforts. And then there are additional benefits that also need to be considered. For instance, if this moving the first payment to October this year instead of October next year, it means that we don't have to borrow money or look for other money to replace that money that we're not getting. And it also means that the money we're getting is grant money. It's not, we don't need to rely so much on our trust fund to give us that money. And that's important because the market is still a bit soft in terms of interest rate returns that we're seeing from the COFA trust fund. So the less we can draw from the trust fund, the more we give it a chance to grow again to where it was before we were hit by the weaker market that we're experiencing at present. So the expected money that we're to receive in October, if everything works out on the U.S. side and on the Palau side, should have been $2 million under the current agreement. Because of the consideration of the United States to give us money 1 year early, we should receive $92 million. And if you look at the budget numbers for this year, we're running at about $90 million for the total budget. So this is a very significant amount. The amount includes the economic assistance that we're getting from the United States in the first year. It's around $30 million, and that's $20 million for, as you can see from the MOU, $20 million for economic assistance, operations. Then there's another $5 million for infrastructure, another $5 million for infrastructure maintenance. The U.S. also recognizes the pressure that we have from borrowing so much. Right now we're still at about $90 million. Starting this year, they will give us $10 million a year for 6 years, and that will help pay down our debt. And then the first contribution to the trust fund happens at $50 million. The next contribution is the following year, another $50 million, so a total of $100 million. And those numbers should be in the MOU. So the agreement is significant. But again, there are other things that are happening when we do the bill. When the U.S. does the bill, we expect they will also put in additional support for us, including support for the Veterans Administration. And we also expect that there will be support for continued scholarships from the United States to our students. We also threw in a provision, and this is primarily attributed to the work of Ambassador Kyota, who also has supported us in the negotiation, to allow those people who are in the United States to work without getting a permit from Homeland Security. And this has been a problem that we recognized, and we put a provision in there. The U.S. agreed to help those students out, students or any residents in the United States. Of course, there's other bills that have been done, including like Medicaid access. And there is another bill that they were working on that we discussed with Assistant Secretary Cantor about expanding the coverage of compact impact to Palauans and other FAS citizens throughout the United States. So there are a lot of work that are happening. We have to recognize Mr. Farrow for his help in pushing these initiatives along. And it shows how much presence in the United States can mean to us when we're working on things like this that are related but not necessarily involved in the particular negotiation. I also want to say that we were scheduled to end federal assistance under the compact. So having federal assistance, whatever we're getting now, continue is also a big achievement under this negotiation. We have one more year left in the current compact. It ends in 2025. And we will use that time to continue to work on different issues like federal programs, language, and services language, and other items that we have discussed but don't have time to complete. And the main issue is we want to get this agreement in and the budget passed so we can get money in October. So let me stop there. I think that was a lot of information, a lot of numbers thrown out there. Maybe I can ask Minister Matul to embellish a little bit on what I've said.
On Torbella, on the necessary. Do se el Torbella al di briefly.
Kora di suakan mo otat sa igel buk lugo Mr. Udoy mutigal buk dinna ko dito kana kwa sa kwa mo omutingi mang big dai time dinulwa sa tial al dadura negotiation sa lumura edera karam lamen Mr. Lomu na nang selbuk lundur siam digen men ne do sa lomes tial agreement da la sa ni ang labol mo ot musel ne buk agreement sa 2010 awal tial ludo del time awal del aisois en dice eso domes es el bucle lodar se me se last tibri traer la ramemo awal rula aisois ludo da plan skira america madome seringa será lo mu la do no wal hora ngosko spera to kol raki metilgi lu para titu ra walel yang brige la hora lo mesergi mo ram ko met a tebel mutem mo da do gira mo tial kampak tagir el mumregra el aga en mari se todo los en cliff sel bol brek el kampak en mumregra audo namle el do el altay mo sigal do le ko do ponen el mol madal win el mol ma audo da metro amle klol el do el ngel amrige lamlo otil wasitial to kora pandemi matokora gide le no slow down le economy le gar na mumregra le derra mlokan bin samriget bukida ospianges ul tulol di sara geizargi kita dimnakal dimne kita tomelli ya geizargi mlania world pandemic no slow down economy de amrigel ombe sergi de tarawil example rabul adal atel huk FAS ne ungila economy de mara u era and october pandemic Sa kita bato para tourism no slow down, amneta amne close para argument kita mamregen. Lo otti sa kita du ren kita kita sa tro disi ya age sa kita mumral digi. Mengultur age kita aldadu, embeda la aldadu mobio telo mangkela meregen. No segala tim kita minister udu. Ulum namreng la aldadu a tokora finance ngar alser all tetmu. El alt time ngira do spare anges. Migi hogi de lolgi sa age sa kita. Nagalnya sebelum sekitar berikan, tak boleh kalau makan lo boleh molowi. Ini betul kan ni ya, amel me moktegani, amoldu atau kalau ikan ami makai sargi, melisi ira government pergi tu mesti ada mood, tu kisi aja sargi tu dia kat sal malu tu ira dong kita ngarat sebelah time. Mospera tu kau nanya edel orang tahu, short term liquidity issue kita. Ablu nak mulu asing Amerika lama meski tak betul lo orang balik dalam agreement. Itu adalah nomor yang tel nangari dalam agreement. Askum so is prajo sang ngar kita next year ng wadi lerul milyon la $1 andera kampa. Kita mungkin kita mal global set. Mamriga lagi niel wasing meski da otiu milyon moldimu kursel mu otel kontrak terkait lerul milyon mu otiu lerul milyon atau mur Oktober. Aklo tu teler tel agreement mawul gadore adani. Ada kalsal timeline lagi kita ultira pra timeline ra budgeting proses ra berikan. Ya close to teller sel me MOU bel sign ng minister udu lo gram berikan. Ultir ka clear at one placeholder sel CBL lo ul bodos perin ngala sel budget ra Biden. Sel submit ra budget ngin mo albi ra berikan. Ika na soyis pra sel segir tao. Ya bukko ta sign ngin no initial ngin eli OCE segir MOU, lo mangela more detail at retail la hospital seludo. Upload to tele regi del ang mo ko tumra do giler mo sign na sel agreement to galam brigel. Aw otil mo rabul adma Pacific especially wa seguida o galam brigel. Emna soyus ba sel sel daw ramo manar seludo dar at sa congress ram brigel. Ngulo re asula la Jeff Farrow ma Lauren sel team brigel. Man lomring lorio. Na ensure mo gider del ang awal mo ngana ka tanat mura al sel vilas. Da budget ram brigel. Mungkin ada mukadam hal ngulus pera toko elit mal confident sure mukadam among seludo dan meokto. Semo support clear igana milgit. Mo meski tak mengarang alakhlek. Mungkin ada mungkin kogi ada lubuk tol tel blad sel la kasil blad sel. Aku ada mo segi de nganegel baby ra direct dulu. Nganya veterans affairs am the clone issue kita aptoka kita aftara ko to club center other belau ngar sela military ram berikan. Betul tira narung setira ada tuam mengarang berigel dapat in mevelo dan dapat in magel ngeso. Terpuluh singkuk tiga mengarang berigel dan balangeso. Seatar audio belajar sisbi. Betul mesel la arat tukara language dan commercial legislation. Ubang ngaseo tirgel ada belau veterans in balangeso dan belau. Direkam banyak tukara scholarships. Tukara work permits. Ngani ada belau belum komplain mengarang berigel dan beri til memela permitted tira audio ngo within. Bang kadang ultu sa ko kurela ambassador kita Kyoto ngun museo lo tu atogora al sel seguido legislation mo museo ra adre bela mo bioterpi asil dikmer tambrege le ma work permit ndre kan bari atogora Medicaid diklo tu telela ya sel lo ul southern ya minister udui al mali sel hook financial package diger ro ul togora grants $1 al time o pel grants na gel mo museo ra pa government tergit amal mol Kita kan yang mutul tarra kalau dong dadu orang berikan nanti kan kalau magim jalan dadu model tarra kalau alsel sel mutul kampak mensebab mara alsel segit tarra kita mungkin kogi dan malil lagi baby ratoi takwa masaya bala sois alsel kita tak mara alsel misal dadu ada kan betul membuat orang ketemu dudet mungkin mungkin kogi dan menghasil icing dulu maka di mor segit presiden dengan yang model
كهلا ديك عمدا سندري كلو تترى هذا صادا يجل تورا ودود بديك لوتر من ممكتكليه سيل اسيستنس البولم مسكيد رابك الرق سيلو المليون ترى important ترى هم كلو تترى هذا صادا سيل ناس أكل العرال هذا لهم أكله ويسي مسه لو المليون راقط الرق دي كده كدول أمريكا لو عشان جيرام لوك ترك كلو أول عشان تل ضمن عشان ناس أكل العرال هذا لهم أكله بكرة ترك كليل وعشان يرول بعشان ترى بكرة سيقول average رايقان نام أمريكا اللي قدر الرق متأسى تيجي يمو سبيرني المرور رباجت متملا ترك كليل وعشان بكرة sel milyon awal ngas ara airul basent. Misal dome singira sel bol mereka lui rak etiam lamo lui etul milyon. Paise esel nges wal dire kalau ukire la agagi dele maintenance le milyon adire kalau mu le milyon after yellu irak etiam la ngariak kalmoewidel milyon merul dartel telan o sisil to adire gal المورسل infrastructure fund اللي رجال أيام المليون mas almo with المليون ما يرول دارت التلان ما هي وقوم قضاء ضغط روي قضاء سكت ملا قضاء المليون لرسل قط الرق يسأل ورا المرسل لولو بغلين قدم لهم ملا أقوام إوال مليون ورا باي تايم سيجد أتر عمله والغن سل أيقال بلا مريغل agreement تريد ديملق سل وسيجا غير الملا المماس لو تيرق سل أرى لا درون sel o si sulul da so dobla la plari il dire mora trust fund la trust fund se ro se ti agora wal endowment gadamla la modegal il sel original intenta trust fund se gadamla singin mo diagara 2044 siamle original da so la gadamla rulin mo perpetual awula sel 50 million el mut 15 million o erura amo rulin mo mukmedar ngar ewal dart million ngar sa trust fund el sumo de richer ewal dart million el rules era endowment malun so da claro al perpetual adola sal clo ewal basent mo laseri ese mo speria y el maral mo clo era ofle agar kariya lang elon mil basent on average ese que del maral mo clo mo bek ragal sel uksesel lo hace sel dola seri la transfund le que sea minimum el bodol top 15 million din se demlara up to 4%. يدير قلنا ريسل بارت بلا على ريدا تراست فاند رواسي على سوق من مريا بقيس أمرون إنغري additional minimum and so ملا 5 million or up to 1.5% ترى تراست فاند إن let's say 400 million and كنا بصادرة 6 million so غري يجل بلا دوسيس برا سيل تريبل سو بكتير سو من مريا يجل بقيس أمرون إمنا سو بكتير سيل مثلا كلا على درون which I think close changes sel aygan mla momregal el agreement el wal mil oit segi ediregal sel mle ulta sola blur amregal ase ayga sel oral momem dum de gaga sole gorgum di sel physical clifa amodia sel briefing ra unit early mal mlo magat taklil wase tianga after bolmere ayga lu iraq adwasa da excel 20 kom adi mo initial ayga lagadim el mol gora mal دولي الغرا مال بيوت تقول تقوم كده أموري يجل تمدرا a year 40 عندنا كمباكت a year 40 كده الموت المورا review دي سيل المورا review كده قدوم مسايقال ملانغاري hopefully ندي قدول سونس قد باي كده الملأل دي already ملاموري سيل البيس البلادر اللي مقدر كده اللي مو ملأل سيا I think كل الوال السبك لا بلور بلام ده قدروت الوجي قاسيك لو كذا مورير لسه سلبل مرة غير 15 كذا مو الجيرو يعني كم مرة غير دوري كذا مو الجيرو إلا ملا مده كذا مو الجيرو كذا مو سيد راسي كذا أقوال مليون المرال بدول با ديرك ترى I think an important thing minister sell every year ملا كذا activate sell economic consultation من نمو ده كده دوغيل مو year 10 ده صادق every year ده صادق يمو كذا من مول من أيجل economic issues رجيدا أكيد ما أدري أمريكا لا مطمئن بس ديوا سيل JCM الغريرة بكرة من أيجل كده عمره سيل أكتورا سيل سبكرين هذا بلولو سيل كذا مرال بدول غير غريا موسونسا دولا بالمطمئن راول من تريد أسيدر أقول إيوكلي كده عمره لو هسه إنجيل الهلب رادر والبي لو هسه ملامو time and please passer تيال minimum wage ويشي because under تيال agreement كده ما نقص أودي درا قبل منت ده كسر لي لو أودي درا قبل منت الرست رابلو علق مقبلون يترا درا هاوس وهسه ملا إيغو دي مودور كليل مين أنا ما كده أنا وريد الثاني هذا مقرأ إلوي أنا قال كده دي مرولان تمرولان أنا سون ساتة الله رابلور بلاو so تيوني ترى سديد نرى هاوس لا تمال لارسل 15 الواسه تمنا مثلا واسه تيام لا متوي ملا مال دي مير تيرا سي مرغم باس تيال مينيمم ويج من ديري غلورا Ablur belami sulang.
Is that a good?
Sulay President, Sulay Minister Udoy Kaumat Matul. So my question, President, maybe from what you were saying, I will sell 2% del wal kora ang halir sell. Is that saying contribute to this overall total of $890 million or outside of it?
Siya total, why siya? Ul demokrat siya.
And then my next question, because this is also subject for U.S. congressional approval, the funding. So how is that coming along? Can you explain that?
Maybe we'll have Jeff, who is he's here today, so let's use his expertise.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you for the question. There were two hearings in Congress this week. One hearing in the House Natural Resources Committee was focused on what China is doing in the Pacific. And most of the discussion was about the importance of the compacts. All of the witnesses, and the witnesses were from academia and other experts in the region, spoke about the essential nature of getting the compacts approved by this Congress before September 30th. Then there was a hearing, I'm a little confused on the dates, whether it was yesterday or the day before, in the Senate, in the Appropriations Committee. And Secretary Blinken of the State Department testified, and Secretary Austin of the Defense Department testified. And they were asked about the importance of the compacts and emphasized that the compacts are vital for the U.S. national security and essential to get approved this year. We've been meeting with the president and the minister when they've come to Washington, with Republicans as well as Democrats. I'm a Democrat, pretty clear. But as the president mentioned, I have Republican partners, including the last Republican chair of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. We haven't met a member of Congress yet who has not agreed that it's important to get this done. Now, I mentioned there's a hearing in the House Natural Resources Subcommittee on Indian and Insular Affairs. The chairwoman is a freshman. She's defeated Lynn Chady, the daughter of the last vice president, Trump's vice president. And she was backed by President Trump and is part of the group in the House of those new members of Congress who are Republican who want to cut the budget. And she was supportive of getting this done. Young Kim is the chairwoman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee on Asia and the Pacific. She's supportive of getting this done. Lindsey Graham is the ranking Republican, the top Republican on the Senate Appropriations Committee on Asia and the Pacific. He said we've got to get the compacts done this year. So, right now, there's a big fight between the president and the Republicans in Congress, particularly the House Republicans, on what we call the debt ceiling, which is really about the budget, with Republicans talking about how the budget has to be cut. And they have a list of cuts that they want to make. Compacts don't appear on that list. I don't know, what will happen with those negotiations. In the end, I think that something will be reached. The president was supposed to go. President Biden was supposed to go to Papua New Guinea. Can't cancel that because of the negotiations. But either Secretary Blinken or Vice President Harris will go in his place. Negotiations will continue, and that will get worked out. So we made, in particular last year, knowing that the House was likely, Democrats had a majority in the House before the last election. And it was pretty clear to me as a Democrat that the Republicans were going to win control of the House. So we made it an effort when the president came in or the minister came in to meet with Republicans to educate them as well and make sure this was viewed as a non-political issue between Democrats and Republicans. This is a national security issue for the United States. So we're, cautiously optimistic about getting this approved. It's a very different situation than existed after 2010. And there are other, I can go into detail on that, but it's a very different situation. So I'm optimistic about it. I know Envoy Yoon is as well. He has also been, as I and my partners have been, and he and his team have been going up and talking to the Republicans as well as Democrats in every committee and finding positive responses as we've explained this. So we're encouraged.
I just want to share that Mr. Farrow was instrumental in getting us those appointments in Washington. And, some of the senators that we met was Lindsey Graham, Senator Manchin. One of the meetings that we had, I was at the Armed Services Committee in the House.
Yeah.
And when we were there at the end of the meeting, and there was many Republicans in that room, they said, well, how much do you need? We sent $1 billion to Ukraine last week. Well, they were ready to act. And that congressman actually came to visit us
Yes.
on one of those congressional visits. So
Republican from Texas.
Republican from Texas.
Yeah.
So, seguid el Uldeswira Radar Amrigera la lo setia priority is share the Democrats and Republicans o mesini loise. Mung kadomara lo asen tribal ngoda uk atmosphere Amrigera el al time sel sera dollar kampaktara sel agreement 2010. Hoy ngaria mondara yosang ang rablu Amrigera. Di sel todos los pering aruba se cautiously optimistic do dia do aseng guarantee ding se do aseng tribal ang maluwila teal.
Mr. President, Minister, you mentioned about that $90 million. So is the $50 million half of the $100 million that goes to the trust fund is part of that $90 million?
Yes, it is. And I said 92 because the U.S. is also willing to give us what they're supposed to give us this year, which is $2 million. So, they're being very generous to us.
So basically the agreements overlap, and they will honor the other agreement, pay that out, yeah.
Misaule President ma Minister malungil information and that question kami mention la setiada kal require ratification ng ira Palau. And the lesson number kal sa 2010 natin na kal ratify. Hindi, kung natin lakal, testari rap to kala Senate, President Senator Eli, maring ako al demand rin iya, lumang guktim na timing schedule, ang mga ngariabol affect rin iya, talurere man ako.
I think there's several issues. I want to mention sa information or all. Di kita, of course, kita selva nga na negotiation, hindi kal maturuak rato, hindi kal sa dollar si. Tara ula meeting sales initially ngamle schedule dara 8 o'clock. Hindi kami rala aldo al mall mura kasus, kasus eli. Miserable mrek sel aldo ikadala mo sabi ede lo ase okay laboria meeting lo matira adro olvira kalulaw edo ay setira a detail tial el agreement el boda pada saying eri saya amle mokte kan dira adro senate our understanding of nani imura meeting el bel scheduling ro sisil time may goro nito sa kalel si goro cancel tira mending to se tia meeting mo tira rubukul bela lagi dire kan invite rubukul bela ding lo de kal si ilme ding nan wil te al ambassador yun am larse mo si loger agering nya mal mlongin mga taklil wa se tial al tial dal wil rida tia plana mo se tia di mol ya lol mol bengire lam rigel merate bele ukharel baskin de kal girel medep ese amne klo tu trel am sa mo oy adra senata mal dim la destrir di senator Palau sa kudur kla senator inabol lego of course nge nge adra oy sen min se tetora udo ka se helpling nge damma information and man mo shelom tri rogoin.
You made the point yesterday. The question for the U.S. Congress is to give the money. The only question for the OEK is whether to accept the money.
Dia ang go to trel agim tial question o ase ratification ng require dia ka adire kable discussion ra ase ra gim ngara meeting of teatro olvire eli ma kita deka dolo dari tial telwiler yet sel kisira dra mrigel me soy se brablur belaw adim el mol le sera da ngwa kampak trawole le tia wadi lol mol mel deka awna bagalel sel bodolo dari amamla amrigel amoski dangeso mauleng require ablur amrigel el pasarala le tegamo to dawdol amoski dawdol kita dimo receive mang di close to trela ulang ambassador yun ako ramil ko la según la ratify ni other belaw ngari sel ko ra tlabogol toy tlabogol sel da se adrablur belaw olbira blur belaw lomtera adrablur belaw adregel oeng ertel toy mang kada direkal malong ito ase ulgo maigal sel plan ngaigal information ro koy sel final agreement bol saying ni PNG di mo kadi mo mregal saying ni kapia mo ele ndigal se del release ra kapi until kada saying hopefully after say that temesang sil this pass a resolution ro ase kada oeng ertel to koy kora di mo adoli adam
Malungila ti kadabal pala persea. Minister, you said that we still have 1 more year left on the older compact, so there's still discussion on other issues, federal programs. So if this agreement is signed next month, Papua New Guinea, I'm assuming it's next week in Papua New Guinea. Will that close this thing, or is it still, we can still have, I mean...
Thank you, Lei. The current agreement ends next year. So we still have time to continue to discuss, and we need to discuss some of those details on federal programs that require a document to be included in there. But the U.S. has committed in the agreement that we're working on now that existing programs will continue. So we do have time. This doesn't close the door on those continued discussions. And in the compact, like the President said, we do have annual discussions, and we can always ask the United States to sit at the table and to discuss any continued assistance, which is also built into the language.
Give Mr. Farrow an opportunity to share a little bit more about the significance of this agreement and where we are. So
as the President mentioned, I go back to the original negotiation of the compact. I was right out of school. It was the first thing I worked on in the White House. And here I am many years later. That was 1979 when I started this, and it's 2023. This is the most significant change in the relationship that has occurred since the original negotiation. And the reason is the following. The original conception of the United States and the negotiation was, we're going to give Palau a certain amount of money, endow a trust fund, and after 50 years, Palau would be responsible for itself and be self-supporting. And what this agreement does is say that, and at the same time, Palau is going to let the United States have strategic denial, which means control over its borders with respect to other countries, and land rights in perpetuity. That was an unbalanced relationship. And as we discussed it with Envoy Yoon, he understood that. And so what this agreement says is that we're going to be, the U.S. is going to be providing assistance for as long as can be anticipated. This is a 20-year commitment, although there's another review due in 10 years, when if this amount or if there are other needs that are not worked out in the annual reviews are done, then there'll be another negotiation in 10 years. But Envoy, you made the point yesterday that 20 years from now, this automatically renews if both governments want to renew it. So that's 40 years. And so instead of Palau having to rely on the trust fund to replace U.S. assistance, the U.S. will be providing assistance for as long as Palau is assisting the U.S. strategically. And it makes the relationship more equitable. And it's a totally different concept than the original concept of the negotiations. I have to add this as well. The president came to Washington and he met with Secretary Blinken of State, Secretary Austin of Defense, Secretary Holland of Interior, John Feiner, Deputy National Security Advisor, the Director of the CIA, and others. And he shocked Secretary Blinken, I have to tell you the truth, because Secretary Blinken had been told, oh, the negotiations are going fine, and this is not going to be a courtesy call and a nice visit. And the president said, this deal is unacceptable. And Blinken was shocked. And we're not going to negotiate on the basis of this. The deal that was worked out in 2020 was for $432,722,000 over the 20-year period. This agreement is $550 million more than that. And it was important that the president tell the truth to the U.S. government. And then, as Minister Dewey will recall, the U.S. negotiator at the time, who was a career State Department ambassador, before that happened, the president will remember meeting with Secretary Holland, and right after the meeting, the career U.S. ambassador, who was the U.S. negotiator at the time for the State Department, said, you have to understand, this is all that the U.S. government can do. We can't provide any more money than that $432 million. And the president said, I don't know if you'll get upset that I quote him, if that's the case, there's no reason for us to talk to you anymore. And so that's why brought up with Minister Udui, so she's, the ambassador sought to have a negotiating meeting with us by video. I think it was September 1st or something of that year.
21.
Just, yeah, 21, just a month or so after the president had been there. And we talked about it. We agreed, okay, we'll take the meeting. And they said, okay, let's start negotiating. Here's what was agreed to in 2020. You know, what do you want to change and so forth. And the minister said, the president was just in Washington. He was very clear. This is unacceptable. This is not a basis for starting a negotiation. We're going to have to start fresh. And they made every effort to try to force the president to, and when I say they, people in the U.S. government, to try to force the president to resume negotiations that have been conducted in 2020. And the president decided, no, we're not going to do that with the same people, with the same offer. And finally, the president was flying through Washington. And I called at home the Deputy National Security Advisor, who I knew from the Clinton White House, and said, if you want these negotiations to prosper, we're going to have to do things differently. I want you to meet with the president when he's going to be just flying through Washington, just here for the day. And we had that meeting. The president was very frank with him. He called Joseph Yoon, who had just retired. Yoon had been the special negotiator for North Korea to negotiate with Kim Jong-un. And I won't comment on president or whatever he is, Yoon's mental state and so forth. But it was a difficult person to negotiate with. And so Yoon he's an economist, a top negotiator of the state of the U.S. government, and he was looking forward to doing other things. And Kurt Campbell, the Deputy National Security Advisor, said, Joe, I really need you to straighten this out. And he came back, and we spent long hours with the minister and the president and Yoon explaining what the situation was, what had happened to Palau's economy, because Palau refused to buckle under to China's pressure to switch recognition from Taiwan to China because of COVID, what the needs were, and he was very thoughtful. We negotiated. They were tough negotiations, as the minister mentioned. We were negotiating language up until the night before the initialing, because we had to. On this trip, there were 3 State Department lawyers and a lawyer from the Interior Department arguing over every word, and Lauren was there, and and Elway, Director Gaeta was, he wasn't taxing them, but he was part of those discussions as well, and with the minister, and we had to hash out and argue over every word, but that was essential to getting this done. You have to know when to say no and when to say yes. And we, of course we wanted more, but we knew the point at which the United States was not going to go past, but we also knew the point that they could go to. And so that's why this is more than twice as much as what had been negotiated before. It's more than 3 times if you take the last 2010 agreement and extend it, which is a 15-year agreement, and extend it to 20 years, this is almost three times what was provided then. That's not a criticism of 2010 from my point of view, because I helped in 2010. The circumstances are different. The US and China were not in the same situation in 2010. And so there's at least so far they could be pushed. The US, the compact was negotiated. The US wasn't, nobody was concerned about China at all. The US was concerned about the Soviet Union. And then the Soviet Union dissolved, and the US felt, okay, we don't have to worry about the Pacific anymore. And the Chinese, I remember at the time they were talking about the 900 ship Soviet Navy in the original negotiations, but there was no more. So there was very little focus on the Pacific. The president had the wisdom of, and the courage and the strength to tell the highest ranking officials of the US government no, and that things had to be done better. And we were fortunate, the geopolitical situation helped. We were fortunate to have a White House that understood and was responsive, and ultimately, and then the president asked for a presidential envoy, because the previous State Department negotiator was not a bad person. She just did not have the stature within the US government to get the White House, to get the Defense Department, the President's Office of Management and Budget, and others to change what they would allow her to do. And we wanted a presidential envoy who would be speaking in the name of the President of the United States, who could tell the Budget Office and others, we're going to have to do this. This is in our national security interest. So, again, the main point I want to make is it's a historic change in what the relationship is. And it sets the pattern, and I know Envoy you believes this, as long as the Palau is helping the United States keep a free and open Indo-Pacific and plays a vital role in that, the United States has an obligation to help Palau economically. And we've changed from the original idea, we'll give them some money, and they're off on their own, to a more balanced relationship. That's what we've accomplished, the President and the Minister have accomplished in these negotiations. So I'm very proud personally to have started on this and getting close to the end of my career. And I don't know if I'll be around for the 40th, maybe to do help. I would certainly try. I know there are people like Lauren and Elway, and the minister and others who will be there, even if I'm not involved. But we have changed, fundamentally changed this arrangement, and it's not going to go back in reverse. It can only go better. 40th anniversary, if there are things are economically still as bad as they are in Palau, as they have been, tourism doesn't recover quickly enough. The United States is going to have to think about, okay, we're going to have to be further responsive to Palau. And we have in the year 50, which the current compact doesn't call for, we have a negotiation essentially on an automatic renewal at the same level of funding that's being provided now. So there's $20 million a year now for budgetary assistance, as opposed to zero for budgetary assistance right now, other than taking money from the trust fund. And by then, it'll be over 29 million. And we'll start from the basis, instead of starting from zero, Palau will start from 29 plus million dollars. We've finally made the relationship more equitable and balanced. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Farrow, for that. That claims that part of history that and how the negotiation happened. Information that you cannot find on the public domain, except for like MOU and stuff like that you can find. So I have a question, maybe for you or for the chief negotiator, because you touched a bit on it. Today we live in this cloud of heated rhetoric and geopolitical tensions. United States, China comes into play, Taiwan, North Korea. So how big of a factor was that contributed to the overall the outcome of the overall negotiations?
It was a big factor. In 2010, as I mentioned, in 2010, the United States wasn't concerned. In the original negotiations, we had the trusteeship. The main pressure was to end the trusteeship. There were 11 trusteeships set up after World War II. 10 of the trusteeships had ended, and the territories had become nations, and the 11th was the Trust Territory of the Pacific Islands, and there was pressure from the UN because the original commitment of the U.S. was to develop these islands into independence. And after a while, the United States realized we don't really want them to be fully independent. So the United States first tried to convince the islands to become a territory of the United States, which is really what the Northern Marianas District opted to do. And then the U.S., particularly the U.S. Senate, was saying, we're not going to give up these islands. We fought and bled for them in World War II, so we need to keep our strategic rights. And then the United States promoted the idea of, okay, we'll make you a sovereign nation, but in return, you'll give us strategic rights. And so that's what was done. And yes, timing is about, in politics, timing is everything. And we benefited from being at the right time. Now, the United States views that with the Soviet Union, people were concerned about war. It's not as much war in the military sense with China, but it's an economic competition. And Palau controls an area of the Western Pacific. It's EEZ, the air above it. It's nearly as large as the state of Texas, adjacent to the Philippines and Indonesia. These are vital shipping lanes for China. And so China knows it and would like to change Palau's association with the United States. And the United States knows that it's essential, again, for keeping a free and open Indo-Pacific. Because the United States, wants there to be free transit through these waters. But is a little bit suspicious of China, what China might do so yes, we benefited from the timing, and the president knew that this was the time to move. I can't tell you, China and the U.S. are trying to lessen tensions between one another. And so a few years from now, the geopolitical situation might be different. So we benefited. It was the right time to make the demands that were made to get the U.S. to focus. And the president had the wisdom to take advantage of that, had the wisdom to designate the Minister of Finance, who is very meticulous and really understood what the budgetary needs and economic needs of Palau are, and to help craft the details of what this agreement is.
Thank you.
No.
Mr. President, thank you, Mr. I just have two simple questions. I'm speaking English, so you can see if you have any insight on this. I think Guam and Hawaii are losing the impact funding of the compact impact for the COFA citizens. Do you know of any, if there's any support for them getting that funding back, or there's a compact impact fairness act that was introduced into Congress?
Yeah, let me explain this. And I went from the Carter White House to the Congress, and there were concerns in Guam in particular about the impact of the free migration, which is one of the most important parts of the free association of the compact, was that people from Palau and the other freely associated states would be able to live in U.S. areas. And so the compact impact program was created to help provide financial support. But what we realized, and this is our initiative from Palau, we went that, first of all, most of the people who are going to work, and they're paying taxes, and they're contributing to the economy, they're contributing to the labor force, and they're essential to the economies of the communities to which they go. So, but what we recognized was that the individuals who are moving, because of what was called welfare reform in 1986, FAS citizens were unintentionally disqualified from social programs. And when COVID hit, we recognized there was the opportunity, because of concern about health, to get Medicaid restored for citizens of the freely associated states. It was our initiative, and we went to Congressman Case of Hawaii and Senator Hirono of Hawaii and proposed this idea, and they sponsored the legislation, and so Medicaid was restored. And then we knew once we had that done, there were other social programs from which freely associated state citizens had been disqualified in the 1996 welfare reform. So what's called the Compact Impact Fairness Act, what's fair about it, it's a little bit of a misnomer. It's using compact impact, but what the real point of that legislation is to qualify Palauans and Micronesians and Marshallese who live in the states for the various social programs, so that those people who need help in communities will get help, and they won't be a burden to those communities. And I would also have to say, we'll see what happens, and I expect that to be part of the Biden administration's legislative package to approve the compacts. And then I think we may see Congress add more money on for communities, but it's become very difficult because now it's not just not just Guam and the Northern Marianas and Hawaii where people are living. There are people living in Arkansas. There are people who are living in, Oregon. Envoy Yoon was talking about his son's best friend, his girlfriend is a Palauan. So, there are a lot of communities now where people from the freely associated states live. And this will treat them as they should be treated. And as I said, 1996 was really an oversight to exclude them. But it took a long time takes a long time to get things done sometimes. Yes.
Presidente Morgan di Tiagora, Yamara, Sensor Mamle, Naya kami to yung begini. Tiswala qualifying ilang selu to swala ya. Pero ba kasi kataman nila ya kare. Ilang nani alwasina marwasul dali mirbela kaleble sebeden. Yang direct promise saludo del mura marshal mamura FSM. Waselaram tamela billion sa telal billion sa gedi milara. Ako sa billion. Makadis mo di sa mga klor mula adang prula sa. Is it fair sel dollar niya bang?
Ngande kallo susi ruba kaldo ase lagam chenja negotiator ngaram kogera adaram rigel. Ngangora amne sola di dangar sel 432 million. Akora no susi ruba kandia.
Ay,
Okay. So it's never enough. Sel dolonia it's never enough. Andi al sumun sodan mo kampera il dois rarat mawa di sira udo de dilu. Ikita ngina ko to klort tigal rogoy. Oy, siya malago waseng makit. Hindi kita ali, nakatobes. Kita unmu ngara 2 million, giren mo chero. Oy siya? Kita namal tiya, dusura marigel waseng. Namo de kato ngarcel waseng kato graduate, mo de kato laudo. Siya la ko to klol impactel. El bodo mesing ira ngar madatan maralme. Oy, hindi nga songos. Hindi agumra lo asing malkloa al sebo clear aklang rida rather belo. And di sokal dula sa tara lo missing ablu amrigan. Kita sel agreement el blol kangeni amrigan lo bangyat. Amal di kada bel agreement. Hindi lu el pages. Aigel baby ablu attigibel mga laigel ngokrok ray ababilingir. Letil kita sel dangara del will sum kada kada kasa baak le kasusu emru la togol direclo hotel wasi kita amru langar ale. And I'll just use an example wasi directora BGST amru langar ale. Se part sel part nation building. Ablu ramrega na 4 years wasi ngiri adapt economic policies el help programil rula ablu min mom CC. Munsori long sir ablu lo mesring is in the right direction. Mang aktinu to mom katakli. Sir ko to to trail dabaya askara government tangar alet memong liter other olvira sem pasara minimum wage do ni rola sem borado ngasa ududera other belau the helper tir sia ba gira del muruni elam ela kadam nasmi audo del maran me kadam la sumuklia tax system rin ila gida dia sikroase another lorior mukara mo ila drang clear mukara make sure a retirees ang niya program til every year hindi kan maran baba ududil nga sa clara la drang oklo ay gadi ngaram dal olbire al time ro ko aktimo ko ansulang oh
Minister Jenkins, we're coming to the end of the school year, so may graduation ng school, yung Mr. Camera after your first year of
thank you.
implementing the round system.
Okay. Fortunately, I didn't have to negotiate this with the United States. Thank you for the question, Lei. Graduation for the high school will be June 22nd. Promotion for the elementary schools will be held the week prior to that, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of the same week. Let me see, the Peleliu, Angara, and Kayango will be on Monday, Palau will be on Tuesday, and Koror schools will be on Wednesday of the 18th, 19th, and 20th, or 21st, 22nd. June, not May. Yeah, that's part of the year-round calendar. Makes that change. Now the private schools are continuing with their own calendars, so they will be having individual promotions and graduations as they seem fit. So that's one change. We will be beginning our next school year on July 12th. So it's a 3-week summer break, pretty much the same as what we had planned out.
Just one more. So back to the compact. But no, this is so we have that $100 million for the trust fund. So did you run any like projections like at the end of the 20th year period? Like if you put that in addition to the existing trust fund, how much would we have at the end of the 20th year? Like 1 billion.
So the trust fund is our fund. Let me first say that. So it's up to us to work to grow it, to find as much money as we can to put in it and not to take out as much, right? So the faucet needs to be running more than the drain. And that's up to us. So we did do some projections. Right now, we are taking money out of the trust fund. That's what we are using. That's why we only talk about 2 million is what we're getting, right? So the idea in this negotiation was the U.S. will give us money so we don't have to take out of the trust fund. If we do take out of the trust fund, which is up to us, we know what the outcome will be. But it doesn't stop us from looking for money from other places. The U.S. as a good partner will support us to ask other people to contribute to our fund. But we shouldn't rely on our savings. That's just one source of funding for the Republic. We should look at other options like savings bonds or other debt instruments, which is something that we've passed a law regarding to allow us to do that. But we also have other contributions from other people, and then we need to build our private sector. If you want to focus on one thing, it's the private sector to grow our economy so our people can stay here and have opportunity. Well, it's really hard to do that when we're relying on the trust fund and the market is going up and down, tourism is going up and down. So a lot of the structure of the assistance that we get from the United States recognizes that. So there is a short term, which is why they give us assistance 1 year early and why they give us money to pay down our debt. And then there is the long-term assistance that focuses on giving us money every year so we don't worry too much about disasters and about tourism going up and down, and lets us work on developing digital residency and other fintech initiatives, improving services and other opportunities for Palauans so they can stay here, help us build our country. So that's kind of the perspective that we took. And, yes, the trust fund is important. For our situation, it's a very good buffer for some of the volatility as well as climate shocks, which is why we added additional crisis money, additional 5 or 1.5% of the fund. But we allow it to grow. That's something that's on us. We have control over that.
Ona kari mula minister bi malu minister ngirai bulu sa kala kala TV musa da close arail kiri la mala so kabe so di sem polo di ada bulu to ka di la ram di
kam koram ka takla kari mil taklaw siringi logi wangaral.
tengara nasion musa da mo close ara sam dia sa september la ma omal
O man. Tal to ko ka ka nga sa ngi kamerti amliwal al merigi makada. Kada tilbi logi wa akamitira tial mga tumokra omal maraton ra June 4th ewal ko singil ongelon malbuy lulwas ka momru la skira el almol mutersay etel giblom katakril mora buay lwas sa badong at mokortiang at tokora a safety ma security ra adrablu agirelo de swal mang kadangarinya maral po the close el partraral Endi ul ko damru ringi ada ka maksaw nda ka dito maksaw al adrablu mal obe da maktakla tele ti alrurt kardire ka lungi la bolu la ka ulay gay del rurt elwa la ka looti aklabul gul mal obe kladru lel dire kan merablu bela in soatero gul adan mo partering au ul tangala mga rel bela malas mulong katak ringi wasa ka makarangi gul adan mo supporter tiang akamiti di imadala akabalmente gida ma presidente ma leadership gida mga mokraudor endi tiang akados be angye soraro kuil adrebelaw el mogut maklile sel top da aisel gidel tial omal maraton en isela blur belaw nda kal isela minister obiang al ubeng betur presidente nta isela blur belaw tiang so adal makataknim na makataklia minister matula chairman ramam luaset yang akatengel maraton el merablur belaw el register del maraton certified mate mir ma recorder tir tial mo mokra al selablur belaw asi il mo spera ikel maraton ngara ikel belaw malubengi diligera magadolingi traungil klang sora ablu el girela iga kita dongot mokla el malasam lom kataklo aseng makarapa da kayong sew resegi del silsa sulang ngayon siya la moro gira ro kulger kaul girel
Tia moram la momre karo gulger. Two things that are happening. Alang National Police Week ara tem la momre week.
We're still in it.
Oh, we're still in it. Sorry. So other more recognized trial uk police ngara PCC rel al time. The forum na crowd wait. Oh, ngara artay man ngara cohort program rela. O trial foral digam la crowd tabod higher tir. Man trial ngara cohort program aurior ngara school. Ngara mawad sebalt junior sumor Kayla Blue, Tumakreng Johannes, ma Sabino Kyoto Junior.
Tigil na ana role.
Oh,
Students sa PCC cohort program. The 11 na ro ko tigil 5 na ana role.
oh, tiga 5 lang ana role.
Yes.
Relaal.
Recognize them.
Magamal congratulate tire kasi keep up the hard work. Dirigal Kluguk, Vice Minister, is Teachers Appreciation Day. Oh, magada malaw litra arbek el parents. Mga ka school. Oh, show appreciation to your teachers and gotten mari lura da sensei. Tara yelura lebera tam klong role mergid, klong mondal mergid underappreciated, I say. Mang melakaba beser tirma mari lura ra bekal sis. I say wala, hindi ka ngaralista na kami na wasat yan. Oh. I say, nurses there. Nurses, my EMT. Last week, similar last week, yeah. So, kadamaral, kadangara, again, mal critical, at sila compact. You know, tell compact agreement, again, although I can make assistant, mal specified. Education, so teachers, healthcare, and security. So, and dito lang climate change. So, so lang reminder, trial uka. Toko bet sils, tira al sils. Iwan mo total na press conference mo. Milo ukte organize trial, tira mo rin loro na bakal sils uka. Border tira al sils, and of course all the ones this week and the last week. Mang di gayi danga kare al sils. Harvey Tagiasi, oh, ngara MOJ, Jordan Awat, ngara MOF, Immigration, yes. Natasha Tele, ngara MOE, ma Ria, ya? Yeah, Ria rulu ko ngara MHHS. Ngalaman mereka sulir, wish them a very happy birthday. Do ni trak langat tangat mora pekla adar bela ma belu adar belu bela kuman bisulang manex. Magi mora PNG. Oh, I think I've said that enough already. I'll be back next Tuesday. Okay. Chula.